So you've got a well-developed diversity program at WPP.
Probably not well developed enough. I mean, it's a diversity program, but it hasn't achieved the metrics, for want of a better word, that we'd like to achieve, namely 50-50. Or I mean, I think technically maybe it might be in favour of women more than 50-50. But across the whole company. So let me put it like this, the lower levels, or overall, we're sort of 50-50. At lower levels and middle levels, we hold that 50-50 ratio, or a little bit more actually. But at senior levels, so-called, it drops down to about a third. And so the objective is to try and get it to 50-50, equal opportunity for all. But we haven't achieved that yet, despite what we've done in terms of diversity programs, which has been quite good. I mean, it started, I think the real thrust, the X Factor programs that Charlotte Beers did. I mean, I rang her up one day and said, it's a shame that we're wasting all the energy, talent that you had put into Ogilvy and then J. Walter Thompson. And is there any way we can harness that experience to the benefit of our senior female leadership? And because it's pretty time-consuming stuff, and the X Factor is really a week where a group of women, probably a dozen or so, spend time at Charlotte's house or at a nice location somewhere, and then she talks them through her experiences and approaches. And then they go back to their companies and then come back again for another week or so. And it's had a remarkably positive effect. I mean, I've never had a bad comment on the X Factor program. I've had comments where people said they didn't think it was going to be very good and they resisted it at the beginning and they wouldn't sort of didn't want to get involved in it or objected to the idea. But after a few days with Charlotte, they've changed their mind. I tried with one other female leader to do the same thing. I won't say who said to me, no, I don't want to do that. And which was a shame because that particular individual could bring a lot to bear in terms of mentoring, coaching.
Do you know why? Do you know why she didn't want to do it?
Maybe because she didn't have first mover advantage. I mean, there is it's an interesting question. This whole question of whether women support women, is another. And I think that was a case of a woman not supporting another woman for whatever reasons. I think women are better in our industry, not necessarily everywhere, but I think they are better than in many areas. They're better at organising their time for all sorts of reasons which you can understand. They're sort of emotionally, I think, better. I think male clients, I think, probably are a little bit more respectful of women. Right? Terrible thing to say, but I said it. So I think women actually, and now that women-women relationship, sometimes it works very well and sometimes it doesn't work. And I think I've heard groups of women talk about this. Women should, in fact, Sheryl Sandberg talks about that, about women supporting women. And my wife talks about that and what she does. So I think, it is a bit of an issue. And I think in that particular case, that was probably it. Mm-hmm.
Are there any things you tried as part of your programme that just didn't really work out?
Not that. Well, I mean, the X Factor is not not the whole of it. What we're trying now is to drive that, and that's highly personalised and very time-consuming. It also, by the way, I think one thing that you do see whenever you do a sort of high potential course, it has positive, but it also has negatives in that you invest all the time, you raise people's awareness, maybe make them look at the horizons even more, and they could decide to go off and do something else. So it's a bit like sending people to Harvard Business School. It changes their mind, and it changes their views, and it forces them to assess or reassess where they are, what they're doing, and therefore can create Frankensteins. But whatever the female equivalent of a Frankenstein is. But no, I don't mean that's. So it does create. It raises levels of expectations, which is also, so you have to fulfil those expectations. But by and large, I think it's been the right thing to do and has had positive effects. Well, certainly for the individuals involved, it's been highly beneficial. For us as a company and for our constituent companies, it's been highly beneficial, but you could argue it's not as beneficial as it is for the individuals.
In a speech earlier this year at an all-female event, you know what I'm going to ask. You mentioned that you thought that women should be more aggressive.
Yeah.
Do you think
assertive.
talking...
Other people said it should be assertive. I'll stick with the aggressive.
Do you think that talking about these issues is a bit of a minefield in itself, that actually when you're trying to be supportive and give advice, it's taken out of context?
Some women in that audience didn't like that. In fact, one woman wrote to me and said that. If it draws attention to the issue, I don't think it's a problem. It's probably, that has been a little ripple because we can't cause a tsunami, but that's caused a little ripple that people have focused on, which actually at the end of the day probably is a good thing, because at least it stirs the debate and the controversy. It's one of the ways of getting the whole area and its set of issues a higher profile, and I think that's probably to the good.
Thinking about women in your business who have made it to the top levels, what characteristics and behaviours?
They can vary enormously. Charlotte is very different to Shelley Lazarus, for example, right? So Shelley succeeded Charlotte at Ogilvy, and then Charlotte went on to be chairperson or woman of J. Walter Thompson. But two completely different types of personalities. Charlotte, I have said this publicly, and I'll say it again, has the attention span of a gnat. But that's part of her effectiveness and charm. Shelley has a totally different style, sort of a bit more studied, I would say. Longer time frames, longer attention spans, very different styles. Shelley is extremely balanced. I think Charlotte would tend to get heavily involved in the period in which she was focusing on something. That didn't mean that Shelley didn't get heavily involved, but Shelley would balance, those three circles that I came across at Harvard Business School, family, society, and career. She was extremely balanced. I think Charlotte and I would be less in the balanced category. So it's different styles and different approaches. If I think about Lindsay Patterson, who's running Maxis now, who invited me to that women's forum, women's evening, when I made the aggressive comment. Also, she probably has a sort of style, actually, if I think about it, probably midway between Charlotte. So she has, some of that charisma around Charlotte, and she also has the sort of organisation. Doesn't mean that Shelley lacks charisma, but that organisation and that balance that Shelley has. So, I think those are three examples, and they're all different styles.
So I've noticed over the last while the female agenda is becoming more and more organised. It's coming much more to the front. Do you think that is going to be at the cost of discussion and attention to other kinds of diversity in our business?
It could be. It could be. It may cause an impact on other ethnic issues, gay issues. And it may do, but I think on balance it probably sort of stimulates the primary demand, if I can put it that way, for all issues of diversity. So I think the fact that you're focusing on women doesn't mean that you don't think about Afro-American women or Asian women or Hispanic women. or gay women, right? So I think, probably focusing on that issue, and it's probably in volume terms the biggest issue, is probably the right thing to do. And I don't think it deflects. I think it probably stimulates people to think about the diversity issue, but stimulates the overall. Obviously, it's very focused on one part of the diversity debate or controversy. So no, I think on balance it's probably good. I mean, if people just focused on Afro-American, Hispanic, Asian, or gay areas, I mean, if they focus just on that, that would stimulate the amount of activity and interest in the question about women versus men as well.
I wanted to get your views on positive discrimination and quotas. And if quotas were introduced by the government, how would you feel?
Well, there sort of is an unofficial quota, isn't there? I mean, like on directors, boards of directors, I mean, you're meant to have a third, or that's the aim, is to get to a third. I mean, I don't think that's the way of achieving it. I don't think that it should be achieved by law. It should be achieved by us implementing it and setting targets and agreeing where we've got to get to and meeting those targets. So I said in relation to us, our objective is to get to 50-50 across the whole company. Well, across the whole company we are, but if you take all the different levels, particularly at the senior level, we aren't. So we don't have enough women in senior positions, and I've said to you that I think they do the job better, not everywhere inside the company, but in major areas of the company. So it's just to our benefit for that to be the case. I mean, it's just like any sustainability area, doing good is good business. And if you tap the half of the population that happens to be female, or if you don't tap them, you're going to suffer. If you do tap them, you'll probably benefit. And particularly if they're even better than men at doing jobs. I guess I'm in danger of being discriminatory by saying that. But anyway, you get my drift. No, quotas I don't think are the answer. I mean, it should be done. There should be guidance. The policy should be around these areas, but we should be left to get on with it, and we should be measured. And maybe you can include it in incentives, and you include it in either qualitative or quantitative. But at the end of the day, I think it should be voluntary, not compulsory.
With a long way to go in certain parts of the industry, particularly in the creative side of things, where women are very underrepresented at the top.
I'm not sure that's true. It depends on what area of the business you're talking about. I'm not sure that's as true for digital. No, but I'm not sure that's as true for digital or public relations or market research or what we call data investment management or media investment management. Maybe not so much on media investment management. I think that's probably a little bit unfair, but you may be suffering a little bit from the Don Draper definition of creativity, or using that word, because creative doesn't begin with me and end with me in TV departments, creative TV departments. So I think it's a little bit unfair, but maybe you're right in the creative agencies.
3% is
of advertising. Yeah, in creative departments of advertising agencies. That's exactly what I say, right? But the business is not like that anymore. That's of our $20 billion of revenue, it's about $4 billion. So media is 5, data is 5, and digital is 6. So the stuff that Don Draper and you're focusing on is the 4. So I think let's get the 75% sorted. And then maybe the other 25 will look after themselves. And it's a part of the business that's increasingly under pressure. But if you're talking about traditional creative departments in ad agencies, maybe you're right, and you're telling me that's the data. I don't know what the data is, but my impression is that that's the case. But not in other parts of it, not in what used to be called direct or interactive or digital. I think women have more. Take Shirley Lazarus as an example. She moved through Ogilvy One and then ran the whole business. And she in New York, Ogilvy One New York, when it was called Ogilvy Direct. So in a way, I mean, I think she started originally in the creative side, defining it the way you are, at Ogilvy, and then moved into Ogilvy Direct, and maybe because she saw an easier path. We certainly see that in PR. You've got Donna Imperato who's running Cohn & Wolfe, and does an extremely good job, and has strong female leadership in that business as well.
I'd like to ask you about a different kind of diversity now. You don't see a lot of people in their 70s in our
You've
industry.
been discriminatory. He's over 70, so out to the glue factory with him.
Well, yeah, I mean, does our industry either throw out or burn out people who...
well, there's somebody, Claire Enders sent me a really interesting graph about the UK, which since layman. So people aged, I think, up to 24, employment after layman fell and has not recovered to the layman level or pre-layman level. From 24 to 50, again, it fell, and it's recovered just above the pre-layman level. The over 50s just went like this, never fell, so people stayed in their jobs. So maybe it's sort of fear of unemployment. I put myself in that group that keeps us going. No, I don't. Listen, I think if you look at John Wren, I think is in his 60s. Maurice Levy is older than me. I think Michael Roth is between John Wren and myself. Yannick Bolloré is lower. I think the Japanese leader is probably the same age, maybe a little bit younger than Maurice. So if you look at the leaders of the age, I mean, they're sort of greying men, I guess. There are all men too. There is no woman. Yeah. Maybe there will be. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, what do you think the chances are that a woman will take over from you?
Well, I mean, the probability, if you take, if you say 2/3, 1/3, sort of is sort of 2 to 1, isn't it? On rather than so the probability is lower than 50-50, right? We do have it. Tamara Ingram is our chief client officer. You've got people like Donna and I said, or Lindsay, who are running businesses. But the probability, if we're honest about it, is less than 50-50, which is what it should be. Now, if you look at external candidates, probably the probability is even lower. But within the company, I think they were higher than the external probability. But in all honesty, to end this on a depressing note, but it's what you would expect, right? Now, maybe when we've got everybody up to 50-50 levels across the whole group, the probability will be better.
When do you think
that
might be?
When I'm long gone. When I am in the glue factory.